we were talking about the state of democracy around the world and the role AI plays. We talk a lot about US and China. You brought up Europe, and we had some debate about it. Should we be hopeful about the European model? What do we have to learn from it?
So, in my worldview, the real competition between China and the Western model is as follows. You have on one hand side, let's say in America, you have, or in Europe, you have technological disruption, and this disruption, of course, always leads to some kind of upheaval within society, and it's also challenging the political system. But we are used to that, and in the Chinese way, it's like, yeah, let's have some innovation, but everything that could have repercussions on the political system, we confine this before it's even happening by surveilling and knowing so much through AI about our citizens. So, and I believe like this is literally like killing innovation and like all sorts of like critical thinking in the way that I was just in Shanghai, and even if you talk about tea or Taiwanese food, people look around and are like anxious about whether or not somebody is maybe listening, and even like you may be in some way like criticizing the party, or the party may think that you criticize it. So this first of all makes the people like paranoid, and then the leadership itself. So I believe that this Chinese model doesn't really work. But I also feel that the turbo capitalist American model doesn't work, because what we know, if you are a citizen is something different than a consumer, but like platforms like Twitter and Facebook, they provide like the public sphere nowadays where media and other players are on, and that's actually like the problem, that if you think you are a consumer, a citizen is something different. And I feel the Europe is super slow in many things. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, but in how to put like into practice and into law our notion of us as humans having rights and being like empowered by human rights and installed with a human dignity, I feel that is a very good like sort of combination, because I don't see like American capitalism and state communism in China working well together. I don't see in our European human rights approach very well working with China together, but I see like America and Europe working together quite well.
So, question, maybe skepticism. I love Europe, by the way. If some people, and I think many people in Japan included, look at Europe and say, okay, you have the right citizen protection, or at least the consumer protection, but you don't have the technology, you don't have the companies. So it's a good consumer protection model for every country that will not have tech, which is maybe much of the world. But if you want to have a thriving, innovative country that also enhances innovation, but also provides the right protections, that's not the model.
So I'm not sure if that's literally related to the question of the political governance that you have. In the 19th century, the English were very busy with like learning Shakespeare by heart, and therefore they just literally like they had a steam engine, but then they said whatever, and then the Germans, Bosch and all these said, okay, we take it from you. Percy Snow wrote about this in the 2 columns. It's a very small essay, you can read about it. So, and now like in the 70s and the 60s of the last century, I once met in the Silicon Valley Andreas von Bechtolzheim. He's Sun Microsystems, and he's one of the first investors into Google. He gave the first 100K to Google, and he was at the TU Konstanz, which is in the south of Germany, and he said, I left Germany in the early 70s because already then we were behind, because literally nobody really cared about it, and that's like why Germany lost like out on this latest development, and this is why everything in regard to tech and crime, the big tech and the money accumulation is now in the valley. So that's something that we took from the British and you took from us. The German, which is a natural thing. If the Germans are too slow, then be it as it may. But now you have, like, let's say, the car industry, and it's still located and pretty much in Germany. So what I feel they are very slow about it, but this is still an ecosystem, and we live by ecosystems. So there's lots of capital in the Silicon Valley, in my opinion. So this is where you can, like, accumulate and also, like, shoot out like lots of projects. Whereas, like, we now in Germany, and Tesla just recently announced to go with a huge like plant to near Berlin. It's much cooler than the south, anyways. But like, we have to harvest on the network and the ecosystem like advantages that we have, and that's something that remains to be seen. But I would hope the Germans and the German car industry would like do that.
I see. Do you so another thing that we talk a lot, I think around the world is the pace of experimentation and data gathering, and your skepticism of Chinese systems is actually quite refreshing. Because most of my tech deployment friends, take the car industry, where are all the new cars going to be sold? China. Where will they have the most audacious social experimentation around getting cars or any other experiments done, so that they can gather the data and train the data faster and deploy and optimize? Often China or somewhere in Silicon Valley, you know. But China is another place. In Japan, in Germany, in the UK, it would take so many years to have like 100,000 cars running around collecting data ahead of other people. That to me says that China, in terms of deployment, if the data is the game, if deployment and learning is the game, they must be doing something right. I'm just playing back what I hear all the time.
Well, as a German, I hear this all the time too. So I was in Taipei. Now Congressman Xu has just left, but I was just But I was so I was in Taipei this summer again, and then there was like a more or less like closed door thing where we talked about this, and then a representative from the German industry who was before that in Shanghai, he said, I'm not saying we're not raising our voice when it comes to human rights violations and whatever, but the point is, now 25 out of 100 Chinese drive a car, and for us, until it's 75, it's still a business. So whenever we open our mouth, it's about these 50 cars. So, and I feel that's actually like, I don't know if that's the right approach to take. The thing is, German, and also in Europe and maybe also in America, you hear this even from the president, like saying they have some admiration for a strongmanship, and saying if Xi Jinping wakes up in the morning and says like, let's go we save the world's climate, that's gonna happen like the day after. But also if Xi Jinping wakes up in the morning and says, let's imprison all Muslims in my country, it's also gonna happen the next day. So I'm not really sure if that's something you want to aspire. So then people say, okay, let's look into Singapore. It's not as bad as China, and it's also like totally different in any way, but still, let's look into Singapore. People give up some of their civic rights in order to have like better social rights. And this is like then for them like to prove the point that good governance is achieved in a way, it's better achieved in a way when you give up some of your liberties. This is total crap. So look into like Hong Kong and Singapore for that matter. So the Hong Kong crisis for one point, it's about housing and housing prices. And so, as Hong Kong is one country, two systems, but still in that regard very much depending on the money and the idea of Beijing, what is going to be built and erected like in Hong Kong in terms of housing. So, very bad housing failed. Singapore, very good housing program, so there's not the same problem as in Hong Kong, but both are not democracies, both are not fully fledged democracies, but one of them is doing great and the other is bad. And what I'm saying about this, good governance does not come automatically because you are not democratic, and it's also not coming automatically because you are democratic. The point is, if you wake up and think, this governance is no good governance, but bad governance, we in democracies vote these motherfuckers out and say, bye-bye, shishi, bye-bye. But in China or in Singapore, you cannot, and that's why I would say our system is the better one.
Who's ours?
The democratic, the globally existing democratic, liberal, the free one. And also it's Japan and Germany and are like in that sense with Taiwan and with South Korea and Australia and Canada in the same camp, like all democracies.
I guess, I'm with you. I'm a kind of die-hard liberal person, but I think, within me, you mentioned Singapore. Are people willing to give up some freedoms to get social optimization, whether it's around safety or less violence or cleanliness or less congestion, etc., etc.? I guess I'd like to think that we value higher noble things and we wouldn't give up many freedoms. But my experience in social media, and I think that's the experience of many tech people here, is that we often do these trades. So for a lot of fun, we take personal information, and people are willing to trade that for certain benefits. So it is not a conceptual issue. We actually put it into consumer terms and actually make that trade all the time. Now, when I look at a country like Singapore, just using that as an example, that's not my necessarily favorite place, but I can totally understand that if I'm from the Middle East, if I'm from Africa, if I'm from like Latin America, and there is a super well-run technocratic place where data actually optimizes around these social issues, and the alternative today is a pretty dismal set of less functioning, very divisive democracies that don't seem to get anything done. that's not necessarily the choice you want, but it is the choice we have often today. Why wouldn't that be the model? First topic that we were talking about that I think some people know, but I didn't know. So your role in passing the first gay marriage, LBGT, rights plus like gay marriage in Taiwan, as a conservative party member, when many people thought that it was an opposition party thing. I've never really heard, that kind of a coming together across the aisle in today's world, particularly around a topic that could in some ways be divisive. So tell me about that and what it took for you to do that, because I think that's a lesson that many societies need to learn, of bridging the gap for kind of a greater cause.
Sure. And perhaps I'll start with a little bit of my background.
Sorry, yeah.
So I'm a technology entrepreneur turned legislator. So when I joined a member of parliament, become a politician in 2016, my friends joke that I joined the dark side. I turned dark. But I feel at this day and age where technology disruption is really pervasive among our public system, you really need someone who can speak the language of both worlds. Someone who can understand the technology language and someone who can understand how to make it work in our public policy world. And the reason why I support LGBT and same-sex marriage in Taiwan is because growing up, I've always been surrounded by gay friends. And when I started my own business, I hired gay people, and also my company is a LGBT-friendly company. And it was during a trip actually related to TEDx. I spoke at TEDx Kyoto in 2014, where my co-worker traveled with me, and she had explained to me on the airplane over to Kyoto from Taipei about how it is being a gay person in society and how difficult it was for her to confide to her family and to her parents. And she always have this double identity. She's one person, one type of person outside, and the other type of person in a house. So after I become a legislator, I make it my mission to break the boundaries between party lines. So my party is a conservative party, so it has always been our party stance to oppose LGBT. But since my party is a opposition party, I know I have a far greater leverage than the ruling party to take a stance on this issue. And so I amended the public civil code in 2016 and to legalize same-sex marriage. And that really stirred a big controversy in Taiwan's political circle. And that really also pushed the ruling party to follow on this momentum. And so in 2016, in December, our legislative yuan, which is our diet, the parliament, passes the committee review on article amendments for the public civil code for same-sex marriage. But the bill was frozen in the legislative yuan for the next 18 months until the following year, our Supreme Court, or the Constitutional Court, ruled in favor of same-sex marriage, asking the parliament to come to a decision within a 24-month time frame to vote on a decision to pass the same-sex marriage law. And the following 18 months was a big chaos within society. In November 2018, Taiwan hosted the local elections with a referendum. There were 5 referendums, 2 in support of LGBT same-sex marriage, 3 are in opposition of the anti-gay marriage. The anti-gay marriage referendum won by a landslide margin with a 7.6 million votes voting against same-sex marriage. So the whole society was pushing back and then retrenching to the ideological world. And come in May this year, on May 17th, because the constitutional ruling is asking Parliament to come to a decision by May 24th, 2019. So on May 17th, the Parliament has to vote on a decision. And so I voted in favor of all the article amendments of the LGBT law, and which encouraged my party members, 13 out of 34 legislators in my party voted in favor of this bill.
A third.
Yeah, a third. So that was a big shock to the society and also in my party. And immediately my party the conservatives members tried to dismember me. But then the huge swirl of support coming from the bottom of society encouraged the people standing together for the right decision, that the members of Congress have the courage to defy the party line and then to act on it. So I think thinking back, I feel this is a moment where I know why I'm in politics. I'm not in it for the dark side, to join the dark force, but I'm in it to carry on the torch, to light a trail of light in the dark tunnel. And LGBT movement has been a march of a 30-year-old journey. Up until today, the first person who came out of closet in the early 1970s, he's in his late 60s, and he's still a very good friend of mine, and I think we owe everything to everyone who have fought in this great battle. And over the course, I interacted with members of parliament from Japan, from South Korea, from Singapore, who told me that Taiwan is such a great example for them to follow, because in their own respective countries, they don't even have the chance to debate the bill in the parliament, and not to mention to pass it. So I feel this is something that we are proud to share, and also a soft power, so to speak, that differentiate Taiwan in this regard.
You have a vote. It's I think if all of us can vote, we'll vote for you next time in Taiwan. Just touching on role of, let's use that example because we've been talking about democracy and AI.
Yeah.
It's a public movement, a lot of media and social media and tech engagement, I'm sure. Most people say that tech is dividing us, that we're in our cocoon, that we only follow what we want, and it's pushing us to be more and more divisive. Politicians obviously have to respond to public sentiment. Why did it work in your case? In that specific case, why wasn't it just very divisive? Why did it create people like you? And what are the lessons for other divisive issues? Because frankly, it's a very inspirational story. If it's a one-off example, even in Taiwan, not to be replicated, we don't have much hope necessarily for the other divisions. Is there anything we can take away?
Yeah, I think today's world is so complex that we cannot approach issues with a silo-based thinking or with one single discipline or expertise. And you always have to approach issues from a multifaceted solutions, and also unlearn the assumptions and challenge the status quo. And take the technology disruptions, for example. Today, one of the biggest disparities is that how do we regulate platforms like Uber or Airbnb and to make sure that the legacy industries can also benefit from the technology development and advancement. And thinking about the role of AI, and how do we make sure that the development of the algorithm is in the direction of the good purpose in society. And just one last bit, because I know you are sort of pointing. Our world is somewhat engulfed with the fake news and disinformation and misinformation. our current regulations and laws are very outdated, and there is no laws or mechanism or framework to govern or regulate the spread of information. So I developed something called the Good Algorithm Project. It is a sort of agreement among all the tech developers and the tech companies to honor the good algorithm that in events of personal security infringement or some other social security, that the algorithm developers are willing to open up the algorithm and then to work with the educators and to make sure that our citizens are informed. Lastly, I just wanted to say that so politics cannot be perceived as politics alone. It's everyone's affair, and it's with the technology that we can reevaluate the role of political participation and making sure that it is put to the good use. Thank you very much.
Well said. So I love the serendipity of you being in town for the launch of Boma Japan Salon. And now we'll have one more 10-minute, and then everyone else after that can go into dialogues with the speakers and each other, because we want to keep this mainly interactive. But I think you all, especially your story about the whole last few years, was very enlightening about how the process works. So we're going to have Alexander come back up, and Rika come over here. And we'll have one more dialogue, and then we'll let everybody start interacting with everybody again.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. Hi, I'm Rika. I'm Japanese, so you're local content, just like James as well. Everybody else had like a chat with you in the tea house. I thought I came at the right time, but I totally missed that. So this is totally cold. I haven't met...
It's already so warm.
I know. We've been hugging each other. So I don't know you, and you don't know me. And James, my good friend, has done like the delve into tech and whatever. I feel so disqualified to talk about anything. But I just thought I'll use the time to get to know you, if that's okay.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my first question to you, because I've read your bio and you have all these things and you've been all over the world, very simple. What's your passion?
So that's such a sweet and good question. I mean, literally, I love to meet friends, and I feel like I share something with you. I have like a list of books I would like to write at some point, and one book I definitely want to write is a book about friendship. Why is that? Everything that we can think of, from giving birth to dying, is entailed in some sort of lawmaking. You know, there's laws about it. You know, how to name your children, when you have to name them, if you move your blood, if you die, whatever. There's no law whatsoever about friendship. And I find this is quite a compelling thing. This is actually the most liberal part in our lives. Like, a friend of mine wrote once a book about his childhood, and he was arguing like the friends we make when we are young, we make out of two reasons, like an abundance of time and a scarcity of choice, because you go to a class at school and then there's 20 other people, and so you somehow, you know, make these friends like arbitrary, but then over the course of your time, the only thing where we are really free is to make friends, and it's actually my passion. I just travel the world for my work, and then I meet people from different backgrounds, religions, cultures, languages, whatever, and we are then at the liberty of becoming friends, and we sort it out by ourselves, and we sort it out with our different religious and cultural and language backgrounds. But that's actually what I love the most in my life, actually.
Wow.
That's what I like, yeah.
How do you make friends then? How do you meet people? Okay, they could be acquaintances and they could be friends on social media or whatever, but what's your secret sauce?
That's a super question. May I introduce to you my roomie at Harvard? He goes by the name Luke Beasley. I love him. He's American, like an all-American boy from Michigan. I know from Illinois, but he roots for Michigan team. So literally every Saturday, I mean, college sports, okay, anyhow. So I met Luke at my first day at Harvard, and we got along very well. We just met in the library, like by chance, and then we chatted a little. And then like we met again and again and again, and then I thought like now it's time to just hang out for a beer, okay? And then Beasley would say, yeah, sure. And you know, this is also something you learn as a German when you go to America. When people say we meet up, that means they don't entirely hate you, but it doesn't really mean you're really gonna meet in the end. That's an American thing. So, but then like, fast forward 2 years in, I once hung out with Beasley like in our free time, and he always would cancel on me, whatever. And I thought, okay, Beasley is gonna be my American project now. I wanna understand how Americans make friends. Because we get along well, but we never hang out. So then at some point, my third year at Harvard, I rented this house and I needed a roomie. Beasley saw this on Facebook that I'm looking for a place, and then he said like, why don't you move in my old place? I'm moving. I said, why don't you move in with me? So he moved in with me, and the day after that, we became like literally best friends. He told me all the stories, whatever. I said, Beasley, you could have had this for the last 2 years. Why didn't you do that? And he said, yeah, but we had nothing in common. You were just like a visiting whatever from Germany, and I'm like in Harvard Law School. So, I mean, I like you, but there's no commonality. So I realized in my 3 years at Harvard with like my European compatriots, that the European way of making a friend, and I include myself as a German in that too, is like, as more diverse you are, as less you have in common, as long you like each other, it's awesome to become friends. So like that Beasley is from Michigan and is at Harvard Law. I'm no lawyer, no offense to anyone, and I also feel like whatever. But like, but I thought I like you. Let's be friends. And so I feel that's what drives me. I meet people, and then I think like there's something in common, and I don't really care if you're a man or woman, if you're straight or gay, if you're from Taiwan or Germany. I feel that's like a curiosity, and after my time in America, I feel that's also shared by lots of my European compatriots, if you will.
You voiced something that I've never been able to verbalize for so long. So you said Beasley was your project. And then that's great.
Yeah.
But then, so from that, do you extrapolate that in like maybe society in the US, there's a different concept of a friend?
Yeah, I mean, yes, there is actually. Yeah, I mean, I want a project. I don't want to like objectify my friend Beasley now. I'm just saying.
We like him already.
No, because you all should like him. Luke Beasley's awesome. But like, it's just like, I mean, I thought like, it's different. Like how you make friends must be different because we like each other, but we don't hang out. So I was like literally, because usually like Germans are known in the world for being like very, if I say I like you, I mean it. If I turn around and don't talk to you, I mean it as well. So like, and if then Beasley is like talking to me very friendly, whatever, I thought, okay, I feel he likes me, but we're never going to the next step of friendship by hanging out over beer and getting shit-faced and whatever. So this is why he became my project in that sense. And so what I cherish about the American way, you can literally go and talk to anyone. Also only, I know what your work is about, like also about the same gender, because like if you go to a girls at Harvard to think, yeah, is he hitting on me? And that's because of other things in which are not really great in American society. But like you can go to any given guy and just talk to him, and then you try to figure out if you have something in common, and then you move forward from that moment. So there's an efficiency, and Germans are like Schadenfreude, like being like malicious, like it's like there's no added like kind of strength. If in America, if you see an opportunity and we both get rich, that's awesome. Nobody needs necessarily to become rich alone, and nobody needs necessarily to be like just like, oh, I'm better than you, whatever. So once you take off, you have more pace of acceleration, also exponentially grow. Whereas in the European way, it's like, where's the wine, where's the cheese, let's hang out. So it's more like, you may be like, the downside may be that you are like, diverting, diluting, or distracting yourself a little too much. Americans are more like focused and straightforward when they make their friendships, and in Europe it's more like, hey, we get along, let's go get out and be like, you know, drink some whatever.
Wow.
I didn't know that was going that way. I love it.
No,
I love to
I
talk
had
about
no
this. I
idea,
love to talk
actually.
about it.
Well, that's why I asked, yeah, so I'm trying to think, oh my gosh, how did I make friends? And my friends, my real friends, and is it a Beasley? Do I have a Beasley? I don't know. But so, with Boma, why you in Boma? What are you doing in Boma?
So, like Lara Stein, who's one of the co-founders, she's a friend of mine, and I met her through Stefan Balzer, who did TEDx talks in Germany, and he introduced me to Lara when I moved to America, and so Lara and I became friends, and then when they started to embark on the Boma journey, they asked me to become part of the Boma Brain Trust. And so that's why I'm here now. And because I actually, literally, when I said, hey, Lara, I'm going to Japan, and then she introduced me to Todd. And then Todd said, why don't you come here? So this is, and then he sent me like audio CVs, and I said, wow, I'm excited to be on stage with you guys. If I may add something about Japan, actually,
Yes,
about
yes,
Japanese
please.
friendship making. So I mean, I'm a guest here only, so I could not really tell. And I lived in Taiwan for a year. This is why Jason became a friend of mine, and I applaud him for being like so LGBTQ friendly. I love it. Literally, like my own leaning is not conservative, so whatever. But you need to, again, that's the European way of making a friend. I don't care that his political ideas are like from another angle of the democratic spectrum. So he became my friend. And so before I came here, I went to Korea, and in Europe you have the perception that the more east you get, the more complicated it may become to be a friend, to make friendships. And also Koreans are very strong in their pop culture. So when I lived in Taiwan, like literally every good show from Korean TV was like either shown in Taiwan, but also then like imitated, like they made a remake. And that's the same in Japan, and also the same in China even. So I thought like, okay, Koreans may be like maybe the platform of East Asia, and I'm not here looking down on Koreans now, don't get me wrong, I have Korean friends, whatever. But I'm so surprised about Japan, actually. Like there's much more foreigners in Tokyo, there's also more people who speak English than in Korea, and there's also like an interest of meeting people. I went to an EDM party last weekend, so maybe that's not like, and I haven't been to an EDM party in Korea, which I should definitely be doing, but like everyone was like saying, who the fuck are you? That's amazing, like let's hang out and drink something, and like people get like so drunk. I mean, I'm above my peak now. So this is what I really liked about like the Japanese way of making friends, and I feel like you are very close in some sense to us Europeans, that like, oh, there's somebody who's not like me, let's talk to him. And I feel also Koreans are not quite there yet, for some reasons, but I feel they could be inspired by you in that sense. Or I should go to an EDM party in Seoul too.
Oh, wow. There's so much food for thought, really. Oh, gosh.
Pick.
Yes, I know. Wow.
Well, can I ask you something too?
Yes,
because I feel
yes.
it's like, I mean, I hear like you work on gender equality and women's rights question, and that's what they sent me in your biography, and we spoke already about like LGBTQ rights, and I wonder like where are we here in Japan? And if I may say an anecdote, I was invited here to a conference about the future of representative democracy, and it was like by a think tank who had his 80th birthday. The Genrod is the name. And they were like lined up like super old, like 70-year-old male dudes, congratulating this, and they were talking about the future of democracy and the crisis of representative democracy. And I looked in the room and thought, okay, 80% of Japan are not here. There's no woman and there's nobody below 70. Like I'm 42, I was the youngest. I mean, so where are we at this point in Japan in that regard?
Okay, so I may not answer it kind of straight, but here's a way to put it. So anyway, 70s is young here. So yeah, I have
70
to
is the new 50.
The 70 is the new 40 maybe.
Oh my God, oh my God.
So we like look great, we live long, and it's all fine. So that just to make sure, yeah. So apart from that, yeah. So where are the people? Why is a room full of 70-year-olds and like they're rocking it? And what's the like 60, 50, 40, 30 generation that should be like ruling the world and moving, society and politics along? But they're there, but they're like considered too young to like be capable of pushing things forward. So the other day with a friend, I had a conversation. So okay, for any movement, same-sex marriage in Japan as well. So we have the already converted. So that's great. Let's just increase that number and move along in the court of public opinion. Love is love. Everybody should have the same rights, not different rights, not just partnerships in Shibuyaku, which we love, and Setagaya Ward, which we love, but the same rights for families and same-sex couples and everything. So there's the people who are already converted. Then there's the movable middle. Then there's the people who we totally should not be even spending an iota of a minute on because they're too far gone and we'll never change them anyway. So when we talked about the movable middle, we said, okay, how do we do this and bring them along? But then actually a friend said, we have to think about the movable middle because that's what's going to change society, but at the same time, the whole organizational premise of what society and sophisticated society should look like, the whole premise in Japan, very scary thought, could be all wrong. So yeah, so that's where we're kind of struggling in terms of how do we change people's ideas about, so same-sex marriage in Japan, Taiwan, we love you. In Japan, everybody who's involved in this movement, we just think it's like, well, it should happen tomorrow. And then we hear the LDP, and I'm not being political, I'm just stating a fact. LDP says, guys, we'll give you everything you want, but not marriage, is what I'm hearing. And it's like, what? But that's exactly what we mean in terms of same rights for same everything. Adoption, everything for everybody. So then you think, but why are this euphemistic political party who's ruled for a long time, why can't it be like Taiwan? Why can't it be like, do we have to like wait until they're 90 and falling off dead before like society moves? So that's, I haven't answered your question, but
No. This is so exciting. May I stick to this the age thing a little? Because another thing that strikes me as a visitor to the United States, and I'm grateful to live there as a guest, it's like if you go to, again, an EDM party in New York and you think like you are 42 and do they let you in, it's like, oh, you're by far not the oldest. So there's like people in their 70s dancing next to you on the dance floor. So I'm saying like there is an inclusiveness in terms of age, and it seems to be like in Japan you need just like the other way around of inclusiveness. And I always feel like if you're 10 years old, your name is Lucy, and you have the grandfather's birthday, and you say, Grandpa, I have an idea. He would say like, stand on a chair and tell us. If you are in Germany and say, oh, there are 10 years, say, Grandpa, I have an idea, say, shut your mouth and eat your cake. So I feel like the age and like also the frontiers between ages and the capability of accessing the public sphere, that seems to be one, is that one of the most crucial like challenges for Japanese society to include everyone like below 70?
yes, I think so, yeah.
And is there like any ideas on how to tackle it? Because literally like you're excluding like 80% of your population. So what's the idea of like, what would you say is a good chance to tackle that?
I'm a bit stuck on this because I've been thinking like, so as a business person, you've got to focus on the old guys too, because they're kind of still making the decisions. They're the ones, they're my clients, they're giving me work, it pays my rent, it pays my school fees for my kids, whatever. But then I was thinking the other day, in 50 years time, I'll be gone, and those people will be far gone. But my kids who are 10 and 8 will still be rocking it and living it. So how does this whole kind of society, grow with the whole thing? So Boma is like a good form. I think I really am personally really seeking out kind of generational communication as well. Because if you don't seek it out, you're just in your little bubble, and you're not going to get there in terms of that generational mix. How has it been in, I don't know, Germany or US? How can they mix generations?
So that's a good point to transition to everybody getting back to your own dialogues. And in the spirit of Alexander's meet some new friends, find a Beasley project. There are a lot of
Beasley will hate me for that, but that's actually, I brought him up a few times in my, go on, sorry man.
No, that's it. So everybody interact again.
All right.